Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Ellen and in this video I am going to be talking about Breasts and Eggs by Mieko Kawakami. So this book was originally published as a short story and later on Kawakami decided to extend it into a full-length novel. So the structure of this book is there are two parts. There is a part one, which is the original short story that she wrote, and then part two is the rest of the novel that she later added on. I am going to be doing non-spoilers for the first part of this video, and then in the second part of this video I will be talking about some spoilery content. So I will put like a little word on the screen to let you know when I'm going to be talking about spoilers. So if you have not read this book yet and you are interested in reading this book, then please do not watch past the non-spoiler part. So I will put like a spoiler word on the screen just to let you know. So first, I have talked about this book a couple times. I was listening to this one on audiobook, and once in a while I was flipping through the physical copy that I got from the library. But later on I decided that the audiobook method was working really well for me, so I returned the physical copy and I listened to the vast majority of it on audiobook. And I did take my time with this one. It was one of those books where I didn't eagerly pick it up, if that makes sense. I know I've discussed it in my other videos, but it's one of those books where you're not exactly wanting to read it as soon as possible in the moment, but once you open up the book or once you start listening to it, the story really captures you. And from the get-go, I'm just gonna say that I loved this book. I really love this message, and here's why. So something that I have found in the two Japanese novels that I've recently read for the first time, The Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, and then this one, Breasts and Eggs by Mieko Kawakami. Something that these two authors are really great at is taking ordinary women and making them the protagonists. They're not anybody special. They're just regular workers, a convenience store worker, and a writer. And just showing the day-to-day life of a normal person while they're grappling with something internally. And I really liked this method. I sometimes feel like in Western cultures, at least books in America, I feel like there usually is this pivotal point in the plot where so much dramatics happen and, you know, feelings are hurt, there's betrayal, there's this and that, and you don't really know where to turn and your emotions are all over the place. That's not really the case with Breasts and Eggs. With this book, I really felt kind of constant throughout it. I didn't have really big knee-jerk reactions, except for one part, which I will be talking about in the spoilery part. It was a part that kind of shocked me a little bit. But other than that, it was a book that kept me mentally stable, kept my emotions in check. And that's something I actually appreciate because most of us live kind of mundane lives, like not in a bad way, but we just live a really nice existence. We go to work, or we raise our kids, or we have dogs or cats or other kind of pets. We have families, you know, we have friends. And that is kind of what makes us who we are. Most of us don't have the everyday dramatics and the stab in the backs and all that kind of stuff. So that is what made this book really great. The first part of the book features three women. You get two of the women's perspective, and then the third woman is talked about a lot. So the main focus character is Natsuko. In part one, she is 30 years old. She's a struggling writer at this point, and the other women are Makiko, Natsuko's older sister, who is 8 or 9 years older, so 38 or 39 in part one, and then Makiko's daughter, Midoriko, who is about 12, I would say, in part one. The main premise of part one is Makiko and Midoriko are coming to Tokyo from Osaka to visit Natsuko. The main reason for this is because Makiko is really interested in getting a breast augmentation. And at first, Natsuko, from talking on the phone with her sister, she's just kind of like, oh, whatever. I don't think she's, I don't think it's a really serious thing, so I'm not going to really worry about it. But then when she sees Natsuko in person, it's been a little while since they've met in person, since they do have the distance between them. She's found that Makiko has lost a lot of weight, she aged a lot, and it actually reminds her of their mom and grandma when they were still alive. And this was concerning for Natsuko, and Midoriko at this point was mute. She was not talking to her mom, and she ended up not talking to Natsuko. Makiko found out that her daughter is talking normally at school. She is functioning just fine, but she just did not want to talk to her mom, and Makiko didn't know why. And that was another pivotal part of part 1, is why is Midoriko not talking, as well as the focusing on Makiko wanting breast implants. And the main part of part 1, I would say, is more like how society's expectations on a women's bodies can make us feel insecure about ourselves. And also, like, why do we care so much about certain things? And also talking about the fundamentals of a woman's body, talking about the menstrual cycle. Midoriko at this point in school was learning about the menstrual cycle and how babies are being made and that kind of stuff. So Midoriko, the main part that she was having trouble with is not really understanding why some people had to be born. Why are some people born and why are some people maybe not being born? And I thought it was a really interesting topic. And I don't really want to go further because then that really is more spoilery. But part 1 was mostly about Makiko wanting breast implants, Midoriko not talking, and Natsuko just trying to figure out, like, what is going on? Like, what is making my sister want breast implants so bad? And what is going on in my niece's life that's making her not want to talk to me or her mom? And so that was really interesting. And that part 1 was the original short story that Mieko Kawakami wrote. Part 2 is the rest of the novel. It makes up like a good portion of it as well. And part 2 follows same people, but now it is 8 years later. So Natsuko is now 38 years old. And I guess that would make Makiko like in her mid to kind of late 40s. And Midoriko is 20 years old, almost 21. And at this point, Natsuko has actually published a book. She's now like a full-fledged writer per se. And she is kind of figuring out her new groove writing a new book. Makiko is still working at her dead-end job, and Midoriko is in college. And the main focus of this part 2 is talking about mostly who has the right to be a parent. Like, what gives someone the right to be a mom or a dad? Is it certain qualifications? Does it have something to do with your body? Is it a certain mentality? Like, what is it that deems someone acceptable as a parent? And therefore, on the flip side, what makes someone not qualified to be a parent? Like, what kind of characteristics of a person makes them not fit to be parents in society's mind? And I really enjoyed this, honestly. Like, it really got me thinking deeper on the expectations we have on men and women in general, just in our own bodies, and also the kind of biases we have on how children are made, the reasons we think are good enough reasons to have a child. Like, why do you want to have a child? What is the right answer to that? And I just really thought this was really profound. And Kawakami's writing style is really easy to get into. It kind of has some flowery writing, but not overly so. It's still really easy to get into. You're not getting distracted by it. Somehow she's really good at getting to the point while also using descriptive words to kind of explain that bluntness in a way that you might be able to understand just based on your own experiences. And how do I explain? Like, I think something that's helped me personally, I guess, is since I do have a child, I have gone through the mindset on, am I ready to have a child? Like, is my husband ready to have a child? Are we financially secure? Are we emotionally secure? Are we doing this for the right reasons? So we've kind of had this mindset before, but I wasn't really overly concerned about what other people thought about my decision to have a child. Since I am a straight person married to a man, and we had a child naturally, so I didn't have to worry about what other people are going to think about the way I went about having a child. But Natsuko, she is considering getting a sperm donor. Natsuko is not in a relationship, so she is considering getting a sperm donor to be able to have a child. She's starting to think about, I just want to meet them. I just want to meet my child. She is starting to do research on sperm donations, sperm banks, even from out of the country, like in Denmark. And that's all I'm really going to say about that. There's so much more to say, but it just really gets into spoiler territory. I hope that this description up to this point kind of gives you the overall feel on what this book is about. Overall, she has done such a great job at just explaining the female body and why we feel certain expectations on our body to look a certain way or do things a certain way. This book also just discusses children, fertility, reasons for having children. What's the best way on having a child? Is using a sperm donor a bad or a good thing? What are the ethics with that? Is it selfish to have kids? It really opens up this really big dialogue, and it also shows how things are still kind of slow in Japan in terms of fertility treatments and expectations in society. It's really hard to get any kind of fertility treatments or get a sperm donor if you're not in a partnership. This is another part of the book that I thought was an interesting topic that Kawakami shared because in Japan, it is still not a thing to use sperm banks, to get a sperm donor. We have conversations with characters that were born with their moms using a sperm donor, and they don't know who their biological father is. And it's talking about, are these kids, what about the kids? The point of having children is for the parents almost. The parents are wanting the kids, but are they really thinking about the children and the situations they're putting the children in when they're deciding to have a kid and the route they're taking to get a kid? And I really like that perspective as well, because it really made me think in a different perspective. And because in Japan, it is a really hush-hush thing if you use someone else's sperm or anything like that, it kind of shows how desperate some women are and the lengths that they would go to in order to get pregnant and have their own child. And that is something that I think is kind of lacking in Japanese society today. Adoption, sperm banks, stuff like that, that's not as common as it is in the United States. I know that there is still perhaps some stigma in using those, but I like to think that in general, we're more open-minded about it, and it is not illegal to get sperm from a sperm bank. It's not illegal to do IVF or to adopt a child or anything like that. Not to say that adoption's illegal in Japan, it's just not as common or as prevalent as it is in the United States. So I really liked learning more about the Japanese culture that way. I did know some of it on my own, but reading the extent of it in this book really gave me a lot more information, and it made me think about just life and what we do with our life in a totally new way, which is something I really enjoyed. So I hope that that gives you a good explanation on what this book is about without giving too much away. I really hope that you do pick up this book. So now I'm going to go into more spoiler details. So if you have not read this book and hopefully I enticed you enough to pick it up, then please stop watching here because I'm going to be talking about specific details. So most of what I'm going to be talking about is in part 2 because I feel like I covered part 1 kind of well and it's short. So part 2 is when Natsuko is 38, and more recently she started to do research on sperm banks because she is feeling like she wants to meet her child. She wants to have a child of her own. She's considering what life will be like just by herself. And something that you get to learn about Natsuko in part 2 is that she used to love this man named Naruse. She was really close with him. They started dating in high school, and he's the only man she's ever been with sexually. And that is because she does not like sex. She does not like sex. She has no desire for it. She pretty much blacks out anytime she tried to do it with Naruse, and she doesn't like it. She loves any other kind of intimacy with him. She enjoyed being with him. She loved being in a relationship. But Naruse, of course, wanted to have a sexual relationship with Natsuko, and she did not like that. And so they ended up breaking up. So Natsuko hasn't been with anyone since like her early 20s. And she almost feels like there's something wrong with her because she often contemplates like looking in the mirror and she's like, I have the body of a woman. I think I have the mind of a woman, but am I a woman because I don't want to have sex? And that is something that kind of bothers her. And for a while, she just ruled children off the table because in order to have children, you need to have sex with somebody. And that idea is just so abhorrent to her that she just figured, okay, I guess I'm not going to have kids. That's just my life. But then she saw on the news, on the TV about this woman being interviewed about getting sperm from somebody, kind of like hush hush, like just meeting someone at a restaurant or something, and he gives her his sperm and she puts it in herself using a syringe and having her own child that way. And as Natsuko is watching this news report, she started to realize that there are actually other ways of having children without having to have sex. And from this point, she started doing research on artificial insemination, sperm banks, sperm donors, reading blogs about it, picking up books about it, and it really started to consume her life. She's just really, at this point, wanting her own child, but she's kind of afraid to go the distance. Like, she's kind of afraid that if this stops being a dream and she's trying to make it into reality, then what are other people really gonna say? Like, I could get in trouble for this, and what will other people think about me since I'm not in a relationship with anybody? And one of the books that she picks up has an article written in it by this man named Aizawa. And Aizawa is a man whose mother got pregnant by having someone give his sperm to her. I guess she was married, but since they went to the doctor and her husband had no sperm, pretty much, it was pretty much impossible for them to get pregnant, and that's why they've been childless for so long. So in the end, her mother-in-law kind of made her go to a university hospital where her husband's side of the family had influence, and one of the university students provided his sperm, and she ended up getting pregnant with Aizawa. And Aizawa is desperate trying to find his biological father, and he didn't even know that his dad growing up wasn't his biological father until he was like 30 years old, which rocked his world, you know. And Natsuko really started thinking about the dual feelings she's having. Like, on one hand, she really wants her own child. She's willing to research to see what it takes to have a child on her own, even if that means getting a sperm donor from a different country. But then reading Aizawa's report on what it's like growing up without knowing your biological father, not knowing what traits of his that he has, what personality traits do I have, just feeling like there's a part of you that's missing and empty. She's grappling with that too. Like, is it selfish for me to want to have a child? And I just thought, wow, like, this was really eye-opening because I never really thought about this perspective. And in the end, Natsuko ended up meeting Aizawa in person. She found out that he was doing like a talk. He's part of this foundation for people that are products of sperm donations and they don't know who their biological father is. And so she attended this meeting and she met Aizawa in person, and he ended up telling her about another conference that she later attends. And she actually starts to become really good friends with him. They talk a lot, and Aizawa does have a girlfriend named Yuriko. And Natsuko did meet her at one of the conferences. Yuriko is also a woman who doesn't know who her biological father is. And Yuriko's character is really interesting and complex because she is someone that does not want to be alive. She's not suicidal per se, but she's come to terms with the fact that if she had the choice to not be born, she would have rather not be born than be alive in the way that her life has turned out. And she said it's not like her life was actually so bad. It's not like certain parts of it was so awful, but in her perspective, just the idea of living as a whole is what's painful. And you know, to be honest, that's not necessarily something I can fully understand, but I'm not in her shoes. I don't know what it's like to not know who my biological father is. So this really opened up my worldview on, I wonder what it's really like to not know who one of your biological parents is, and what kind of impact mentally will that have on you. And that's something that Natsuko's trying to figure out. Like, on one hand, that's the route that's pretty much the only route she can take if she wants a child of her own. But on the other hand, she's meeting these people who are like a symbol on what her future child might be like. They might not know who their biological father is. And so Natsuko's trying to figure out how she can try to do this while also know who the biological dad is and have some kind of information to where if her child in the future wants to contact the father, they can. And there is one part of the book that was pretty disgusting, I'll admit. Like, this is the only part that really got me, that really made me uncomfortable. So Natsuko was emailing potential sperm donors that are willing to just give her samples, you know, in a cup, hand it to her and be like, okay, here you go. Hope you get pregnant. Good luck. So she was emailing some prospects, and in the end, there's a man that responded to her, and his name was Onda. And like, that's another thing that like made me kind of grossed out, because his last name was Onda. That's like so close to my own last name, Onoda and Onda, like really. Anyway, so Natsuko ended up meeting this guy at like a cafe or a coffee shop or something, and they're talking. You know, he's trying to figure out what kind of woman she is, making sure she's a decent enough person that he'd want to give his specimen to, and that she's a responsible person. He doesn't want to try to help somebody that he feels is, you know, in his eyes, unfit to be a mother. But she soon realizes that as she's talking to this guy, that he is a little disgusting. I don't want to sound rude or anything, but some of the comments that Onda has made my skin crawl. Like, he was talking about how from a very young age, he felt called to help women have babies. And it's because, you know, from a young age, whenever he would masturbate, he like wondered on like how many sperm he had in his semen and just how strong they are. So he went to like a lab and put some of his semen on a microscope and looked at it and how he could see them swimming around. And he was like boasting about how good like the motility and the numbers are for his sperm. And, you know, like the way he was like bragging about how much experimentation he's done and how he's looked at his own stuff under a microscope so many times. And just, you know, like, as a woman, I just personally did not need to know that. Like, if any men out there do that, I don't need to know that. It made me a little uncomfortable, and it made Natsuko really uncomfortable, and she couldn't get out of there fast enough. Like, that was the one part of the book that really, like, made me go, what am I listening to? I was chopping vegetables for dinner while I was listening to this part, and it made me lose my appetite a little bit. So anyway, in the end, I thought this book was really good. It's one of those books where I felt like it's long, and sometimes you don't really know what the focal point of it is, because it's just about the day-to-day life, you know, the friends she's meeting, you know, she's drinking with her friends, she's talking to this person. So at times I felt like it's a little long, but at the same time, if someone were to ask me, then what parts would you recommend cutting out? I don't know what to say to that, because I feel like it's all important. At the same time, it's just kind of fluffy, or no, that's not the right word. I don't really know what I'm trying to say. It seems really long, but if I were to try to cut something out of it, I wouldn't even know what to cut out, because at the end of the day, it all kind of seems like it all matters to the plot of the story. The only complaint, besides the Onda situation, the only complaint I have about this book is the ending. So this whole time, it's like a lazy river at like a water park, right? You're floating along, you're like floating along the story, you're listening to what's happening. There's no huge ups, no huge downs. You're just kind of going along. And then all of a sudden it just stops, and like it's rushed at the end. It's like the lazy river all of a sudden turned into like a Grand Rapids, and then the ride's done. That's kind of how it felt for me. You know, in the end, so this is a big spoiler if you've been watching up to this point, but a really big spoiler is, in the end, Natsuko and Aizawa ended up having a child together. Aizawa decided to end things with Yuriko. He likes Natsuko, and enough to the point where he wants to have a child with her. He's like, hey, I know you wanted a kid. Why not have one with me? So in the end, you get all this buildup on like what's going to happen with Aizawa. You kind of know Natsuko's starting to have feelings for him, and she's navigating how she's going to be a mom. Like 99% of the book, you're like, is she going to be a mom? Like, what's going to happen? Then boom, the very, very end of the book, you know, all of a sudden she's pregnant. There's like a time jump. She's pregnant. They're describing how, oh yeah, in the end, Aizawa and I decided to have a kid together, and it took like 5 attempts over 8 months, and blah, blah, blah. Oh, now I'm in labor, and then boom, I had my kid. And I was like, are you serious? Like, I listened to all of this, and all of a sudden, like, so much of like their critical part that I was waiting for just got like zip, zip, boom, done. And I was just like, what? Like, I'm not saying the events on what actually happened made me sad, but I wanted more information. I wanted more detail about all of those things. And because the whole time, like, Aizawa and Natsuko were kind of showing feelings for each other, and like their friendship was starting to turn into something else, like, in the end, they decided, oh yeah, we decided not to be in a committed relationship, but whatever we think, he might be involved with a child. And I was like, how did that happen? Like, Aizawa ended up confessing that he liked Natsuko towards the end before the time jump. And then how did they decide that now they're not going to be in a committed relationship? Like, it was so disjointed for me. So that kind of threw me out of it for a bit. Like, I am happy Natsuko ended up having her child. I'm glad she came to terms with how she wanted to have the child. She ended up having the support of Makiko and Midoriko. Her friend Rika was really supportive. You know, she has these things going for her, and I liked how it ended. But you just got to know these characters so well. Like, you could understand their thought processes and where they're coming from, only to have it be so rushed at the end. I just kind of felt like it didn't really do the characters justice. So that's my only complaint besides the onda part. I could have done without the onda part. I just can't stop thinking about this book. Like, now it's really making me stop and think about society. There is this lady named Sangawa who is Natsuko's editor, and there is a part of the story where at the end, Natsuko decided to confess to her two friends, Sangawa and Rika, another writer that Sangawa works with, and she ended up confessing, hey, I'm thinking about having a kid by myself. And Rika was totally supportive. She's like, yeah, do it. Like, I have my daughter, but I'm divorced, like, and I'm totally content being alone and raising my daughter without my husband's help. I don't see why you can't do it. Like, go ahead and do it. That's great. But Sangawa was so harsh. Like, Sangawa and Natsuko left Rika's house at the same time. And Sangawa's like, don't take Rika seriously. And Natsuko's like, what are you talking about? And Sangawa pretty much said, like, having a kid by yourself by a sperm donor, like, psh, whatever. Like, that is so crazy. Like, who would do that? And that hurt Natsuko's feelings, and obviously, and Sangawa just kept going. And she was like, why would you throw away your whole career to be a mom? Like, writers need to fully dedicate themselves to being writers. Like, that should be your only calling. And that's why Rika only writes, like, not important kind of stuff. Like, you have the ability to be a really great writer. And if you have a child, you're not going to be like that. And it was just so hurtful. Like, I was actually surprised that Sangawa said these things to Natsuko because, you know, Sangawa was really supportive throughout Natsuko's writing career, and it was just, that really kind of punched me in the gut as well, hearing Sangawa say these things to Natsuko, just being so narrow-minded and unaccepting on a choice. And it's like, who gives us the right to determine, first of all, whether or not someone gets to be a mom, or how they want to go about being a parent? You know, like, and especially Sangawa didn't have any kids, and if that's how she wanted to live her life, that's fine. So to have this friend go off on you and saying you're crazy, you shouldn't do that, you know, whatever, that was just so incredibly hurtful, and it almost made me feel like those things were being said to me. And yeah, and that was the last time that they spoke. It was a really sad part of the book. And this whole book just made me stop and think about, you know, how critical women are of our own bodies. Like, why Makiko wanted to get breast implants and Midoriko was blaming herself, like, because they're poor. Like, if I just wasn't born, then my mom wouldn't be struggling so much. And the Aizawa and Yuriko being children out of sperm donors and not knowing who their biological father is. And Yuriko saying, when our moms decided to have a kid, they weren't thinking about us. They weren't thinking about the kind of lives we're going to lead or how we're going to be impacted by being born in this situation. And it really made me stop and think, is the idea of having a child, is that selfish? Is it selfish to want children? Is it selfish to not want children? In the end, I guess it's only up to us to decide for ourselves. So anyway, I blathered on for so long, but this just goes to show that this book really is profound. Like, I was really blown away by this. It seems like such a simply written book, but it's really not. It really opened my eyes to the different struggles that women face, and a lot of them I faced myself. Just, you know, I've had insecurities, and still do, of course. I have insecurities about myself and wondering whether or not I'm doing the right thing and how do others think about me. And even just as a half Japanese person, whenever I felt not good enough in Japanese society, that's exactly what Makiko and Natsuko were kind of feeling. They're feeling out of place and not fully belonging. This book just really opens up so much discussion and thoughts on our society and children, our fertility, our bodies. And I really think it's a book worth reading, whether you're a man or a woman. I really highly encourage you to pick it up. If this at all sounds interesting to you, I really recommend it. Anyway, This is really long. My video showing it's 35 minutes long. So I will end this here. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it to the very end, thank you for bearing with me. I'm just really passionate about this book, and I will leave this here. Thank you so much for watching, and sorry I blathered on for so long. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you and discuss books with you. Until next time, guys.